The Women's Euros is finished, and football has come. No, it came home again. England is apparently the best women's team in Europe, and it is now not up for debate. They are a dynasty. And there are a couple of different things that happened over the course of this game, I guess this tournament and stuff that I want to point out. But one fact that just makes me very happy is somebody that grew up in a country that is a women's soccer enjoying country. In fact, especially when I was a little kid, I feel like not a lot of people know this. So I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent, and then we're going to get into the nuts and bolts, the nitty gritty, the down and dirty. But in the United States, when I was growing up, soccer was viewed as a feminine sport. I would imagine in part because of Neymar's dives, but also in part because it was a sport that more women played than men in the United States. That is a very, very common situation for colleges or even high schools to have women's soccer teams, but not men's soccer teams. Particularly at the university level, this is because universities have to have the same number of men's and women's athletic scholarships, and there is no women's American football, which means all of those scholarships have to be made up with a couple of women's sports that can't have male counterparts, basically. And so you end up with, your volleyball teams and your soccer teams. There's a lot of universities that have women's soccer teams and not men's. And as a result of all of that, it was viewed as a feminine sport. It still is in large parts of the United States. If you go to rural Alabama, soccer's for all them gay Europeans, or like, I did my best Alabama, but I think you know the stereotype, right? Now, growing up in that world, I am a fan of women's football. I have always watched the U.S. women's national team. I have vivid memories, even when I was a kid, and my family doesn't really understand how soccer works, right? All of us sitting down to watch the women's team play at the World Cup, right? Because America can get rah-rah and behind a team even if they don't even know the rules. Just watch the U.S. beat Pakistan in cricket, and all of a sudden everybody on that team became viral for a week, and everybody was making American bald eagle firing a rifle memes, except it was like a cricket bat. You get the idea, right? They were putting the bowler, whoever, the guy that had moved from India 10 years ago, he was on Mount Rushmore all of a sudden right next to George Washington, deservedly so, because we'd beaten Pakistan at cricket. So I am very happy to report that this tournament, at least BBC's reporting, 12.2 million people watched the final of this tournament. And I have to imagine that's a record. That's a shitload of people watching the final and watching England lift the trophy against Spain. That is remarkable. And of course, I'm not trying to be unrealistically hype about anything, about the growth of the women's game, because I just think it's great. It's like I just said, really the first football that I remember watching as a kid was the U.S. women's national team. The men's final had 19.3. That's not a huge difference. And you remember, of course, the English men were also there, right? This is obviously just in England, but you can tell, especially from the fan support in the stadium. Oh, the cops are here again. Dude, honestly, that's the weirdest thing about living in New York, is I grew up in kind of rural-ish Florida, like fringe suburb Florida, and you just never heard sirens. But here, there's so many people in such a little space. There's always somebody that fell down the stairs. I hope they're okay, right? But I cannot tell you how many times I'm recording and have to stop talking in the middle of it because there's a siren, but I just decided to power through. Anyways, there is an English team in the final of both of these Euros. The men's had 19.3 million viewers. The women's had 12.2 million. That's remarkable. I mean, that is remarkable. Anybody trying to tell you that the women's game has not absolutely exploded in popularity, in importance, is lying. Now, obviously, the national team game is ahead of the club game on the women's side. I don't really see a problem with that. I think, take what you can get in that point. I think the club side will continue to grow probably at a slower rate. But it's easy to get behind your national team. And it's clear, like I was saying before that siren showed up, that it's not just England either. Spain. If you were watching the final on TV, the Spanish support in that stadium in Switzerland was fantastic. They were loud. They were singing. I heard the word España about 400 million times while I was watching that match. Problem is, it didn't work because England won. And it's a funny match. It's a funny old game because I didn't really feel like England was the best team in this tournament. If you actually had the opportunity to watch the tournament, I watched part of it. I didn't like sit down and watch every match as I've done with other international tournaments before. England didn't feel like the best team. They were losing to Sweden by 2 goals with like 13 minutes to go in the quarterfinal. This was a survival championship for England, more so than the last one. I felt like they were a better team maybe 4 years ago or 3 years ago, or whatever it was, than they are now. But it doesn't matter as long as you get the trophy. This is just the observations of an armchair dude sitting in a room talking about the game. But Spain's got to feel like they let this one go. I really think Spain is the best team in the world. The way they've developed their players, the way obviously they have Bonmati, who's like God out on the field, right? They will feel very similar to the way Sweden's going to feel that they let this one slip. They also had the lead at halftime. These 2 goals were very similar. If you didn't get a chance to watch the match, it was basically just a deep cross and a header and just some poor defensive marking, a good pass, the header back across, kind of finish it off. It was pretty tepid. But then you go to the penalty shootout. And I don't know what was going on in this tournament. But regardless of the growth of the women's game or whatever, this is the worst fucking penalty tournament I've ever seen. I did a video about England against Sweden. Right? And in the video about England against Sweden, we spent the whole time talking about how ridiculous the penalty shootout was. Because England missed 3 penalties in a row and still won. The goalkeeper for Sweden saved 4 of the 7 penalties she faced, but in large part because she missed her own penalty, Sweden didn't win anyways. And in this tournament, there was some stat before this penalty shootout happened, right? I don't remember exactly what it was, but one of those stats that pops up on the broadcast before this shootout. And it was like 24 of 42 penalties in the entire tournament had been converted. How's that possible? I mean, there are physiological arguments for the fact that taking a penalty should be easier in the women's game. The goalkeepers are not as big. It's not always the case, right? There are some not giant goalkeepers in the men's game, but there's just more room in the goal to aim for. As a fact of life, if anything, it should be easier. And say whatever you want about the technical level of the players, the top level of the women's game. I'm pretty sure they can kick a ball into a net. Right? And if you have eyes and you watch this tournament, you saw moments of great skill. Right? It's not like there is some sort of massive, the women's players are so bad they can't even kick the ball into the net. No. These women's players get paid millions of dollars because they are the best women in the world at kicking the ball into the back of the net. Which brings me back to how the fuck can none of them, like this was just, there was something in the air in Switzerland. Maybe it was the altitude. Maybe it was all that Nazi gold, right? There was something in the air. They could not take penalties. I don't know. 24 of 42. The XG of a penalty in the men's game, I would imagine it's slightly different in the women's game in the other direction, is 0.77. That means 75% of the time you should be scoring. They were well below that in this tournament and in the shootout as well. Now, England got struck with, Beth Mead was the first penalty taker. She accidentally double touched the ball because she slipped. Even though the shot went in, she had to retake it, and on the retake, it was saved. It was like an all right penalty. But I mean, the good thing, really, for England is if you're going to miss on target. Because you know why the reason England won both of these penalty shootouts? Every single one of their penalties actually hit the target. They forced, sure, they weren't great pens. The other one that got saved, the 4th pen, it was, and even some of the pens that went in. The goalkeepers were on it, by the way. The goalkeepers in this shootout were diving basically the right way every single time. But the real issue for Spain, the difference-making penalty for Sweden and then for Spain, was Parayuelo. I think it's Parayuelo. You take a shot at that. Parayuelo. That person, she missed. She missed the goal. It's the cardinal sin in a penalty shootout. You can't miss the goal. But she missed it because, the 2 takers before her had both been saved, and so you overthink it, you try and push it a little farther in the corner, and she just kind of hooked it wide of the post, trying to, inside post and in, and it was just shaving the outside of the post instead. England took bad penalties but hit the target. That is why they are the European champion. But there is no real rhyme or reason for why the penalty takers why the penalties were just so bad in this tournament. England won The other penalty shootout going 4 for 7. They won the championship shootout going 3 for 5, but I'll be damned if they didn't hit the target. I'll be damned. There's one other story that came out of this as well that kind of blew my mind. It was Lucy Bronze, who said that she had apparently, like, she's kind of, an iconic player for the English women's team, right? She said that she had played the entire tournament with a broken leg. Sorry, with a, what was it? I mean, it was played the whole tournament with a fractured tibia. What? I mean, like, I don't have a medical degree, but I was pretty sure even if you had a fracture in your leg, there was just no way you were going to be, I don't know, running around for 90 minutes. Then she said she hurt her other knee I think it was during this match, but then, she hit it right on, like, then hit the nail on the head at the end. She dropped the bar at the end. That's what it takes to play for England. Damn. England's the best women's team in Europe. Weirdly, I think Spain's the best team in the world, but they can't beat England, so England gets to bring home the trophies. Your move, English men's national team. You better watch out. England's turning into the United States, where the women's team's just a hell of a lot better.